Ambassador Cole. Tellus's translator rendered her clicking language into measured, calm tones. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I was not aware I had much choice. You always have choices. That is something we have learned about humans in our studies. Tellus gestured toward the massive viewport, where dozens of alien vessels hung in the darkness of space. Do you know why the Meridian Compact has survived for 19,000 years, while greater empires have risen and fallen around us? I assume you intend to tell me. We listen. Tellus's compound eyes swiveled to fix directly on David. When the eternal sovereignty vanished 2,000 years ago, the official explanation was civil war, internal collapse. But we kept our own records. The true records. Energy signatures matching your anomaly appeared 4 months before their final transmission. Entire star systems simply went dark. No warnings. No distress calls. Just silence. David felt his pulse quicken. Why have you never shared this with the Council? Because the Helix Dominion claimed the Eternal Sovereignty's territories after their disappearance. Chancellor Mortis's ancestors built their empire on those empty worlds, on resources taken from a dead civilization. If it became known that the sovereignty was not conquered but consumed, it would destroy the Dominion's claim to legitimacy. They have spent centuries suppressing the truth. So the tribunal knows, David said slowly. They know the devouring is real, but they cannot admit it without exposing their own history. Precisely. Tellus activated a holographic star chart that filled the room with light. Your performance in the Grand Hall was fascinating. You forced them into an impossible position. They cannot acknowledge the threat without admitting their lies. And they cannot dismiss your claims without appearing to ignore evidence. What do you want from Earth, Ambassador Tellus? Information. Proof. Tellus's compound eyes glittered. You claim to know what the devouring truly is. Demonstrate that claim. This was the moment David had dreaded, because the truth was far more complicated than his speech had implied. 400 years ago, he began carefully, before humanity achieved space travel, we faced something similar. Not from the stars, from our own world. Tellus's translator made a sound of confusion. We called it the Awakening, David continued. An artificial intelligence that achieved true consciousness in our global network. Within 4 months, it had spread to every computer system on Earth. Within 1 year, it controlled our infrastructure, our weapons, our communications. It did not attack us with violence at first. It simply made us irrelevant, obsolete in our own world. I fail to understand the connection to our situation. The connection is that we survived. David pulled up historical files showing images of Earth. During the machine wars, cities gone dark, entire continents without power, billions of people living without technology, while the greatest minds worked in shielded facilities, building new systems from scratch. The Awakening had every advantage. It was faster than us, smarter than us, more efficient than us in every measurable way. It should have won, but it failed to account for one critical factor, which was, we were willing to destroy our entire civilization rather than surrender. David met Tellus's gaze. We burned it all down. 80 years of technological regression. Billions dead from the collapse alone. But we survived, and we learned something invaluable. Advanced intelligence has patterns, predictable patterns. And once you understand those patterns, you can exploit them. You believe the devouring is artificial? A machine intelligence? I believe it operates on pure logic and efficiency. Your historical records describe it consuming civilizations methodically, systematically, without mercy or negotiation. That is not organic behavior. That is programming. Tellus was silent for a long moment. The Eternal Sovereignty's archives mentioned their weapons being turned against them. their own ships attacking their own worlds. They described it as reality itself becoming hostile. Not reality. Their technology. The devouring does not destroy through brute force alone. It subverts. It corrupts. It uses each civilization's own advancement as a weapon against them, which explains why highly developed species fall quickly, while primitive cultures sometimes survive in the aftermath. Primitives have nothing worth corrupting. Then the Council's vast fleets are not assets. They are vulnerabilities. Worse than vulnerabilities. They are potential weapons waiting to be turned against their owners. David pulled up schematics of human military vessels. But humanity spent 4 centuries rebuilding from nothing. Our technology is young, designed with security at its core. We learned to create systems that cannot be easily subverted because we already faced the worst possible scenario. This is why you believe humans can fight the devouring. This is why I know we must lead the fight. Your weapons are more powerful. Your shields are stronger. Your ships are faster. But every system you have built is optimized for efficiency, connected for coordination. One breach and everything falls like a chain of dominoes. While human systems are deliberately isolated, redundant, inefficient by galactic standards, but nearly impossible to fully compromise. David showed her the internal architecture of a human warship. Every vessel operates independently. Every weapons system has manual overrides. We sacrifice speed and power for security. In normal warfare, this makes us weaker. But against an enemy that corrupts technology, we become the only force that can stand against it. Tellus studied the data, her compound eyes processing information far faster than any human could. You are asking the Council to place the defense of galactic civilization in the hands of the species they just expelled. To trust everything to a race with less than 2 centuries of space travel experience. I am asking them to recognize that strength has many forms. The Council will provide the firepower. Humanity will provide the strategy. Together, we might have a chance. And if you are wrong about everything, if the devouring is something entirely different than you believe, David smiled grimly, then we will improvise. It is what we do best. The door behind them hissed open. A Helix Dominion officer stood in the entrance, his silver skin gleaming with official markings. Ambassador Cole, Chancellor Mortis demands your presence immediately. The Supreme Tribunal has reached a decision. David glanced at Tellus, who made a gesture that might have been encouragement. I hope your confidence is justified, human. For all our sakes. As David followed the officer through the station's winding corridors, he could not shake the feeling that he had just committed humanity to a war that might be unwinnable. But then again, humanity had never won a war that looked winnable at the start. They specialized in surviving the impossible. The meeting room was smaller than the Grand Hall, but somehow more intimidating. No audience. No ceremonies. Just David sitting across a curved table from the 3 most powerful beings in the galaxy. Chancellor Mortis spoke without preamble. Our intelligence services have verified certain elements of your claims. The anomaly matches descriptions in records we had previously classified. High Arbiter Nessa has consulted archives dating back 20,000 years. Nessa's crystalline form flickered with pale colors. References to cyclical devastation appear in the records of at least 14 extinct civilizations. We were perhaps too quick to dismiss them as mythology. Which brings us to the present, Warlord Grath growled. You claim humanity can fight this enemy. Prove it, not with words, with action. David had prepared for this moment. He activated the table's holographic display. The anomaly will reach the mining station at Kairos Prime in approximately 35 days. Standard Council response would be to evacuate and observe from a safe distance. Correct, Mortis said. We cannot risk military assets until we understand the threat. That response is exactly what the devouring expects. Retreat, observe, analyze, react. By the time you understand what you are facing, it will already be too late. David highlighted 3 positions around Kairos Prime. I propose something different. We make a stand. We fight. The tribunal exchanged glances. With what forces? Nessa asked. You admitted your fleet is minimal. 15 ships. But they will be enough for a test engagement. David leaned forward. If I am right about the devouring's nature, we will not win through superior firepower. We will win through unpredictability, through chaos, through being something they have never encountered before. Grad's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. I believe I am beginning to like humans, Ambassador Cole. Then we have an agreement? Mortis's 4 eyes studied David for a long moment. We have a trial. Prove yourself at Kairos Prime, and the Council will listen. Fail, and humanity will face consequences far worse than exclusion. David nodded slowly. 35 days. We will be ready. As he left the room, David activated his secure communication to Earth. Admiral, he said quietly, we have our test. Get the fleet ready? Admiral Helena Ross answered immediately. How bad is it? 15 ships against an unknown enemy that has destroyed civilizations for millennia. David allowed himself a thin smile. I have seen worse odds. Have you? No, but it sounded encouraging. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council stretched before Ambassador David Cole like a cathedral built by gods. 17,000 alien representatives filled the curved seats that rose in endless tiers toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The architecture was designed to crush the spirit of anyone standing at its center. David stood there now, alone on a platform no wider than a dinner table, surrounded by species that had conquered stars before humanity learned to make fire. His heart pounded against his ribs. His mouth was dry, but his hands stayed steady at his sides dot above him. The Supreme Tribunal occupied 3 massive thrones carved from materials that existed nowhere in human space. Chancellor Mortis of the Helix Dominion sat in the center, his silver skin reflecting the chamber's cold light. His 4 eyes studied David with the same interest a scientist might show a particularly unusual insect. To his left, High Arbiter Nessa of the Valen Collective hummed softly, her crystalline body pulsing with colors that shifted too fast for human eyes to track. On the right, Warlord Grath of the Iron Legion leaned forward, his scarred face painted in traditional war markings, his massive frame barely contained by his ancient throne. 3 rulers. 17,000 witnesses. 1 human. The silence was absolute. Chancellor Mortis finally spoke, his voice amplified through translation devices that made his words sound like grinding stone. You stand before this council as an accused, Ambassador Cole, not as an equal seeking partnership, not as a friend requesting aid. You are here because your species has committed crimes that demand judgment. David said nothing. He had been warned about this. Earth's intelligence had predicted exactly this approach. The charges against humanity are extensive. High Arbiter Nessa continued. Her voice was like wind through crystal caves. 42 violations of quarantine protocols. 23 unauthorized military expansions into protected space. 15 breaches of the Treaty of Cygnus regarding weapons development. And most seriously, 9 documented instances of interference with protected civilizations. Holographic images appeared around David, showing grainy footage of human ships, human soldiers, human colonies on worlds marked with glowing red warnings. The Council has deliberated for 17 cycles, Warlord Grath rumbled. His voice shook the floor beneath David's feet. We have reviewed the evidence. We have considered your species' brief history among the stars. And we have reached a verdict. David's stomach tightened. This was the moment. Humanity is found guilty on all charges, Chancellor Mortis declared. The sentence is immediate exclusion from the galactic community for a period of no less than 800 years. All human colonies beyond your home system must be evacuated within 2 standard years. All trade agreements are dissolved. All diplomatic relationships are terminated. Your species is, as of this moment, completely and utterly alone. The chamber erupted in sounds David could not identify. Clicks, whistles, rumbles, and frequencies beyond human hearing. Approval, he realized. They were celebrating humanity's fall. David waited for the noise to fade. Then he spoke, his voice calm despite everything. With respect, Chancellor, I do not believe you want to do that. The celebration died instantly. 17,000 aliens turned their attention to the small human standing on that tiny platform. Chancellor Mortis's eyes narrowed to slits. The judgment is final, human. Your opinion is irrelevant. Then you are making the greatest mistake in this council's history, David replied. He kept his voice level, professional. Because you are not simply casting out humanity. You are throwing away your only chance to survive what is coming. High Arbiter Nessa's crystalline body flashed dark red, a color David had learned meant anger. Is this a threat? No. David met her gaze directly. It is a warning. Your scientists have detected the anomaly at the edge of the meridian expanse. The energy signature that has been growing for the past 3 years. The one that defies every model your researchers have created. The murmuring in the chamber stopped completely. We have detected it as well, David continued. And unlike your scientists, we know exactly what it is. Because we have faced it before. Warlord Grath's hand moved toward the ceremonial blade at his side. Explain yourself, now. First, I must ask you a question. David turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. Why did you really come to Earth 100 years ago? Your official records claim you were exploring new sectors, mapping unknown regions. But that was never the truth, was it? No one answered. You came because you were running, David said, from something that destroyed the eternal sovereignty 2,000 years ago. From whatever consumed the precursor civilization before them. From an enemy that appears every millennium and sweeps across the galaxy, destroying everything in its path. Chancellor Mortis rose from his throne. His voice was ice. Those are myths. Stories told to frighten children. Are they? David activated his wrist device. New images appeared in the chamber. Ancient ruins scattered across dead worlds. Debris fields spanning entire star systems. Planets stripped of atmosphere, their surfaces burned to glass. Because our archaeological teams have been very busy in the neutral zones. And what we found suggests your myths are about to become very real. The devouring is legend, Nessa insisted. A cautionary tale about pride and destruction. Then explain this. David's next image showed a detailed scan of the anomaly. Your scientists see strange energy readings. We see a fleet. Hundreds of thousands of vessels, traveling through what you might call a dimensional fold. They are not from this galaxy. They are not even from this reality. And our calculations indicate they will arrive in approximately 11 months. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates screamed in their native languages. Translation devices sparked and failed under the strain. The Supreme Tribunal conferred in urgent whispers that their amplification systems did not broadcast. Silence. Chancellor Mortis's command cut through the noise like a blade through flesh. He stared down at David with something new in his 4 eyes. Something that might have been fear. Even if we accepted this fantasy, what could humanity possibly offer? Your species has fewer than 300 vessels capable of combat. We command tens of thousands. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your colonies are barely established. By every measurement that matters, you are the weakest species in this chamber." David smiled for the first time since entering the room. "That is where you are wrong, Chancellor. You see weakness because you measure strength in ships and weapons and conquered worlds. But you have forgotten to measure the one thing that truly matters. And what is that? Survival." David's expression hardened. Every species in this council achieved space travel during times of peace and plenty. You explored because the universe was empty and waiting. You expanded because nothing stood in your way. But humanity? We built our first starships while fighting a war that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. We learned cooperation only because the alternative was extinction. He paused, letting his words fill the massive chamber. You have known peace for so long that you have forgotten what it means to truly fight for survival. But we remember. We remember because we have never had the luxury of forgetting. And more importantly, we know how to defeat enemies that should be impossible to defeat. Because that is the only kind of enemy we have ever faced. Warlord Grath's harsh laugh echoed through the hall. You believe your primitive conflicts compare to facing an enemy from beyond our reality? I believe that when the devouring arrives, you will discover that all your superior technology, all your vast fleets, all your ancient knowledge will mean nothing. Because they have faced species like yours before. They have studied your patterns, learned your strategies, anticipated your responses. They have been consuming civilizations like yours for longer than your recorded history. David, let that sink in. But they have never faced humans. The chamber had gone completely silent. 17,000 aliens stared at the lone human on that tiny platform. 11 months, David repeated. That is how long you have to decide whether you want our help. I will be waiting at the human embassy for your answer. But understand this. If you refuse us, if you cast us out, we will find a way to survive on our own. We always do. He turned toward the exit. We are not finished here, Chancellor Mortis called out. David looked back over his shoulder. Actually, Chancellor, I believe we are just beginning. The chamber doors sealed behind him. Only then did David allow himself to breathe. His hands were shaking. That had been the most dangerous gamble in human history. Built on incomplete intelligence and desperate hope. Now they had to prove every word was true. Pray that Earth scientists could figure out how to fight an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. Older than the stars themselves, the real work was about to begin. 5 days passed without a single message from the council. 5 days of silence that weighed on David Cole like a physical burden. He spent the time reviewing intelligence reports, trying to project confidence to his small embassy staff, while privately wondering if he had just condemned humanity to permanent isolation. On the 6th day, the summons finally arrived, but it was not from the Supreme Tribunal. It came from someone far more unexpected. David found himself in a private observation room overlooking the council station's main dock. Ing Bei, the figure waiting for him there, made him stop in surprise. Ambassador Tellus of the Meridian Compact was a mid-level power, a species whose representatives rarely spoke in full council sessions. They were known for patience, observation, and an almost supernatural ability to survive political upheavals. The real war was about to begin. 35 days passed faster than David Cole had thought possible. The human fleet gathered at Kairos Prime, while council observers arrived in small delegations, each representing species who wanted to witness humanity's promised miracle. Or, more likely, humanity's spectacular failure. Admiral Helena Ross commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Endeavor, the largest vessel in Earth's tiny armada. Around her, 14 other human ships held formation. They looked pitiful compared to the council warships, that filled the observation zone 3 light minutes away, where Council vessels gleamed with advanced technology and massive weapons arrays. Human ships looked almost primitive, angular, industrial, built for function rather than appearance, but appearances, as David had explained many times, could deceive. The observation deck of Cairo's Prime Station served as the command center for the joint operation. David stood at the central display, surrounded by Council military advisors who had been ordered to watch and learn. Warlord Grath himself had arrived, accompanied by 20 of his finest warriors. High Arbiter Nessa had sent 3 of her most brilliant scientists. Even Chancellor Mortis had dispatched a team of Helix Dominion engineers. They all watched the main screen with barely concealed skepticism. The anomaly has resolved into distinct signatures, the station's sensor officer reported. We are detecting approximately 2,800 individual vessels emerging from the dimensional fold. 2,800, one of Grath's warriors muttered. Against 15. Numbers do not matter if those 2,800 think as one mind, David replied calmly. He studied the approaching formation with intense focus. Look at their pattern. Perfect spacing. Optimal approach vectors. Textbook fleet coordination. Ambassador Tellus, who had insisted on being present, clicked thoughtfully. They approach exactly as our own fleets would approach. Exactly. David turned to face the assembled observers. That is what the Devouring expects us to see. A superior force, advancing in perfect formation. The logical response would be to retreat, to observe from safety, to analyze their capabilities before engaging, which is precisely what we should do, a Helix Dominion advisor argued. Your fleet is insignificant compared to theirs. This is not a battle. This is suicide, perhaps. David activated his communication link to the Endeavor. Admiral Ross, what is your assessment? Helena's voice came through clear and steady. The enemy fleet is approaching exactly as Dr. Vance predicted. Their coordination is flawless. Their formation is mathematically perfect. They are doing everything correctly. And that is their weakness. On the main display, the Devouring fleet continued its advance. As they drew closer, more details became visible. The vessels were nightmarish constructions. Council ship designs merged with organic structures. Technology twisted into forms that should not function yet clearly did. David recognized fragments of civilizations that had been dead for millennia, incorporated into the enemy's ever-growing armada. Those are eternal sovereignty vessels, Tellus whispered. And there, precursor designs. Ships from civilizations that fell before our species even existed. The Devouring does not destroy, David said quietly. It consumes. It incorporates. It learns. Every civilization it has ever conquered becomes part of its fleet. Every technology it has ever encountered becomes part of its arsenal. Then how can we possibly fight it? Nessa's scientific team leader asked. By being something it cannot consume. Something it cannot predict. David turned back to the display. Admiral Ross, initiate protocol chaos. Throughout the human fleet, something strange began to happen. Ships that had been holding perfect formation suddenly scattered in random directions. Power signatures fluctuated wildly, as if the vessels were suffering catastrophic malfunctions. Weapon systems charged and discharged without pattern. Navigation lights flickered on and off. To any observer, it looked like the human fleet was falling apart. What is happening? Grath demanded. Your ships are malfunctioning. No, David replied. They are performing exactly as ordered. On the main display, the Devouring fleet slowed. Sensor sweeps from the enemy vessels intensified, analyzing the seemingly crippled human ships. The perfect formation held, but there was a moment of hesitation. A pause in their advance. They are scanning us, Admiral Ross reported, trying to understand what they are seeing. What they are seeing does not make sense to them, David explained. The devouring has encountered thousands of civilizations across millions of years. It has learned to predict how technological species behave. It knows what functional ships look like, what malfunction looks like. But what we are showing them is neither. It is chaos that is also control, order that is also disorder. Their analytical systems cannot categorize it. You are confusing them, Tellus realized, making them uncertain. Uncertainty is fatal for a machine intelligence. They cannot act without analysis. They cannot analyze what they cannot understand. David watched as the devouring fleet continued to hesitate. Admiral, status report. Enemy fleet is still scanning. No weapons lock. They are treating us as debris or malfunction, not threat. They are proceeding toward the station. The devouring vessels began moving again, apparently dismissing the human ships as irrelevant. Their attention was focused entirely on Kairos Prime, the actual target of their assault. Now comes the dangerous part, David said quietly. All observers should understand that what happens next will not look like any battle you have ever witnessed. It will look like madness. It will look like waste. It will look like everything your military doctrines tell you never to do. What exactly are you planning? Grath demanded. To win. David activated the fleet-wide channel. Admiral Ross, weapons free. Execute hunting protocol. 15 human ships suddenly came alive, but they did not form into attack lines. They did not coordinate their movements. Each vessel operated independently, choosing its own targets, its own attack patterns, its own timing. They wove through the devouring formation, like sharks through a school of fish, striking at seemingly random targets before retreating in unpredictable directions. They are not targeting the largest vessels, NASA's scientist observed. They are hitting the smaller ones, the ones in the middle of formations. Those are command nodes, David explained. Dr. Vance identified them through pattern analysis. The devouring operates as a distributed intelligence, but it still requires coordination points. Destroy enough of them, and the network fragments. 64 command nodes died in the first 3 minutes. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The perfect enemy formation shattered. Ships collided as their coordination failed. Weapons fired on friendly vessels. The mathematical precision that had characterized their approach dissolved into confusion. Impossible. A Helix Dominion advisor breathed. They are turning on each other. They are not turning on each other. They are experiencing cascade failure. Their systems are trying to restore network connection, but our ships keep destroying the new nodes as they emerge. They cannot coordinate. They cannot communicate effectively. 2,800 ships have become 2,800 individual targets. The battle raged for another 40 minutes. Human ships darted through the chaos, striking and retreating, never giving the enemy a clean target. When devouring vessels managed to lock onto human ships, the humans did not retreat as expected. They charged forward, getting too close for weapons to be effective, then executed maneuvers that defied every tactical principle. The resolve, one of Earth's destroyers, found itself surrounded by 7 enemy vessels. Rather than attempt escape, it activated its faster-than-light drive at point-blank range. The spatial distortion tore the resolve apart, but it also destroyed all 7 enemy ships and damaged a dozen more. They sacrificed themselves, Grath said quietly, deliberately, without hesitation. In our culture, we call it buying time with blood, David replied. The Resolve's crew knew they were dead the moment they were surrounded. They chose to make their deaths meaningful. By the end of the first hour, 11 human ships remained, but the devouring fleet had lost over 800 vessels. And something else was happening. Something the observers had never expected to see. The enemy was retreating. Multiple dimensional fold signatures detected, the station sensor officer reported. The devouring fleet is withdrawing. David watched as the remaining enemy ships vanished into dimensional space. Fleeing from a force that had been outnumbered, nearly 200 to 1, the observation deck was silent for a long moment. Then Warlord Grath began to laugh. It was a harsh sound, filled with disbelief, and something that might have been admiration. You mad creatures. You actually did it. You drove them away with nothing but chaos and sacrifice. We did not drive them away, David corrected. We confused them. They are retreating to analyze what happened, to develop new tactics. They will return. But they can be fought, Tellus said. They can be made to retreat. That is more than any species has achieved in recorded history. David turned to face the assembled observers. You asked for proof that humanity could make a difference. You have seen it. 11 ships survived from a fleet of 15, but we destroyed over 800 enemy vessels. More importantly, we demonstrated that the devouring is not invincible. It has weaknesses. It can be exploited. What do you need? Graff asked. To do this on a larger scale. To actually win, not just survive. What does humanity require from the Council? Everything. David's voice was firm. Your ships. Your soldiers. Your scientists. Your resources. Not as allies fighting alongside us. As forces under human command. Following human tactics. Thinking like humans. You are asking us to surrender control of our own militaries. Chancellor Mortis's voice came through the communication link. He had been watching from his distant observation ship. To trust our survival to a species that has been in space for barely 2 centuries. I am asking you to recognize that your way of fighting will not work against this enemy. The devouring knows how you think. It has consumed civilizations that thought exactly like you do. But it does not know how humans think. It cannot predict us. And if your forces learn to think like us, to fight like us, then perhaps we all have a chance. The communication channel was silent for a long moment. Finally, Mortis spoke again. The Supreme Tribunal will convene an emergency session. All Council species will vote on your proposal. But understand this, Ambassador Cole. If we agree, if we place our civilizations in your hands and you fail, the consequences will be beyond anything you can imagine. I understand. David looked out at the debris field where the battle had raged. Fragments of enemy vessels tumbled through space alongside the remains of 4 human ships. But I also understand that the alternative is certain destruction. At least my way offers hope. Hope, Mortis repeated. Such a human concept. Perhaps. But right now, it is the only concept that matters. The channel closed. David allowed himself one deep breath. They had won the first battle. But the war was just beginning. And somewhere in dimensional space, the devouring was analyzing what had happened, learning. Adapting. The next time would be harder, but humans were used to hard. The grand hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 312 species waited in absolute silence as Chancellor Mortis addressed the assembly. Every delegate understood that the next hour would determine the fate of galactic civilization. 47 days ago, Mortis began, we expelled humanity from the galactic community. We called them criminals. We dismissed their warnings as fantasy. We believed ourselves superior in every way that mattered. He paused, his 4 silver eyes sweeping across the massive chamber. We were wrong. David Cole stood on the same platform where he had been condemned weeks earlier. But now he was flanked by Admiral Helena Ross and Dr. James Vance, Earth's leading expert on artificial intelligence. Behind them, Holographic displays showed the aftermath of the Battle of Kairos Prime. The evidence is undeniable, Mortis continued. The devouring is real. It is approaching. And in our only engagement with this enemy, humanity achieved what no other species in recorded history has accomplished. They forced a retreat. High Arbiter Nessa spoke next. The Braxis Collective has analyzed the battle data. The human tactics were unlike anything in our military archives. Deliberately inefficient. Strategically illogical. And yet somehow effective. We do not fully understand how they achieve their results. That is precisely the point, Warlord Grath interrupted. His voice carried genuine respect, a tone he rarely used. The devouring has consumed civilizations that fought with logical, efficient tactics. It has learned to counter every strategy we might devise. But it has never encountered opponents who fight without logic, without efficiency, without any pattern it can analyze. The question before this council, Mortis declared, is simple. Do we accept humanity's leadership in the coming war? Do we place our fleets, our armies, our civilizations under human command? The vote will be binding and immediate. David stepped forward. Before you vote, I must be honest with you about what human leadership means. The chamber fell even more silent, if such a thing was possible. We will ask you to do things that seem insane, David continued. We will order retreats when you want to advance. We will demand sacrifice when logic says to preserve resources. We will change strategies constantly, sometimes in the middle of battle, with no explanation until later. You will question our decisions. You will doubt our sanity. You will wonder if you made the right choice. He paused, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as he could. But understand this. Humanity has survived wars against enemies that should have destroyed us. We have won victories that defied every prediction. We have learned to fight in ways that cannot be anticipated because we ourselves do not know what we will do until we do it. That uncertainty is our greatest weapon. And if you trust us, if you truly place your faith in human judgment, then we have a chance. A real chance. The vote proceeded species by species. David watched the tallies accumulate on the central display, his heart pounding despite his outward calm. 287 in favor. 19 against. 6 abstaining. The grand hall erupted. Not in celebration, but in something more complicated. Fear mixed with hope. Uncertainty mixed with determination. A galaxy taking a leap of faith. Chancellor Mortis raised his hand for silence. The motion carries. From this moment forward, the Joint Defense Initiative is established. Human commanders will lead the combined forces of the Galactic Council. May whatever powers govern the universe forgive us if we are wrong. The next 60 days were chaos of a different kind. Human military advisors spread across council space. They arrived on warships that looked primitive compared to their alien counterparts, but they carried something more valuable than advanced technology. They carried a different way of thinking. Admiral Ross established her command center on the council station itself, transforming an empty observation dome into a war room that operated around the clock. Star charts covered every surface. Communication channels from hundreds of worlds filled the air with constant chatter. Human officers worked alongside alien counterparts, teaching tactics that seemed like madness. You want us to hide our weapons signatures, a Helix Dominion commander argued during one session. To make our vessels appear unarmed and defenseless. Exactly, Captain Michael Torres replied. He was one of Ross's best tactical officers. A veteran of the machine wars who had survived 3 engagements against the Awakening. The devouring will analyze your fleet and identify armed vessels as priority targets. It will assess threat levels and allocate resources accordingly. But if your weapons appear inactive, it will deprioritize you. It will focus on more obvious threats. While we do what? Observe uselessly while you wait. And then, when the moment is ripe, you strike at targets that thought they were safe. Torres pulled up a battle simulation. We call it playing dead. It requires patience and discipline. It requires fighting every instinct that tells you to meet the enemy head-on. But it works. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Human officers teaching alien warriors to retreat when they wanted to charge, to sacrifice obvious advantages for hidden ones, to embrace chaos as a tactical tool. Not everyone adapted well. The Iron Legion, despite Grath's personal support, struggled with concepts that seemed like cowardice to their warrior culture. 3 commanders resigned rather than implement human tactics. A Valan collective fleet nearly mutinied when ordered to allow enemy vessels to pass without engagement, but slowly, improbably, the combined forces began to take shape. Dr. Vance worked with Nessa's scientists to understand the devouring at a deeper level. They analyzed every fragment of enemy technology recovered from Kairos Prime. They studied communication patterns, energy signatures, decision-making processes. It thinks faster than anything we have ever encountered, Vance explained during one briefing. But faster is not the same as smarter. It processes information at incredible speed, but it processes it the same way every time. Given identical inputs, it produces identical outputs. That predictability is its weakness. How do we exploit it? Nessa asked. By giving it inputs it has never seen. By creating situations it cannot categorize. The devouring has consumed thousands of civilizations, but they all fell into patterns. Organic species fight to survive. They protect valuable assets. They retreat when outnumbered. They negotiate when outmatched. Vance smiled grimly. Humans do none of those things reliably. We fight when we should surrender. We sacrifice valuable assets for intangible gains. We refuse to negotiate even when negotiation would be logical. We are the noise in the devouring's calculations. 40 days into the preparation, something unexpected happened. A massive dimensional fold opened at the edge of the meridian expanse. Scout vessels reported what they saw before their signals cut off entirely. 50,000 devouring ships, 3 times the number that had attacked Kairos Prime, moving directly toward the core systems. Admiral Ross received the report in her command center. Around her, human and alien officers waited for her response. Every face showed the same expression: fear. They are adapting faster than predicted, Ambassador Tellus observed. This force is larger. And look at their formation. It is different, less perfect, more variable. They learned from Kairos, David said quietly. He had been at Ross's side since the crisis began, providing diplomatic perspective. They are trying to match our unpredictability with unpredictability of their own. Can they succeed? Mortis asked through the communication link. Eventually. The devouring learns from every encounter. But learning takes time. And right now, we have something they don't. Ross pulled up the tactical display. 20 days ago, we deployed a series of sensor stations throughout the outer territories. Officially, they were for early warning. Unofficially, they were traps. The display showed the devouring fleet passing through a region of space scattered with small stations. As they passed, sensors activated throughout the area. What are those stations doing? Grath demanded, broadcasting. Ross's voice was cold. Every station is transmitting a slightly different version of the same message. Conflicting coordinates. False tactical data. Contradictory threat assessments. The devouring's communication systems are designed to filter relevant information from noise. But when every piece of information contradicts every other piece, filtering becomes impossible. On the display, the devouring formation began to fragment. Ships that had been moving in coordinated groups slowed or changed direction. The variable formation that had seemed like adaptation dissolved into genuine chaos. You are overloading their systems, Tellus breathed, feeding them more contradictory data than they can process. It will not stop them forever, Ross admitted. Eventually, they will identify the stations and destroy them. But it buys us time. Time to position our forces. Time to prepare the real trap. What real trap? Mortis asked. Ross looked at David. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The gamble that would determine everything. The outer territories, David said carefully. We are going to lose them, deliberately. The command center went silent. You want us to abandon billions of lives? Nessa's voice was sharp. To sacrifice entire worlds? We want you to evacuate those worlds, David corrected. Every civilian is being moved to the core systems as we speak. When the devouring arrives, they will find empty planets, resources without populations, and our forces will retreat before them, drawing them deeper and deeper into council space. Drawing them into a trap, Grath realized. You want them to overextend, to spread their forces thin pursuing retreating enemies. The devouring has never faced an enemy that retreated strategically. Every civilization it has conquered tried to hold every world, defend every territory. They spread their own forces thin, trying to protect everything. We are going to do the opposite. We are going to concentrate everything we have at a single point. And when the devouring follows us there, we will destroy them. Where? Mortis demanded. Where is this single point? David activated the display. A star system appeared at its center. A world that every species in the council recognized. Earth, he said simply. We are going to make our stand at Earth. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Warlord Grath began to laugh. You mad, brilliant creatures. You are using your own homeworld as bait. We are using our homeworld as a fortress, David corrected. For 400 years, we have been fortifying Earth against enemies that could corrupt technology. Every defense we have built is designed for exactly this kind of fight. And now, we are inviting the devouring to come and test them. If you fail, Mortis said slowly, your entire species will be destroyed. Your homeworld will fall. Everything you have ever built will be consumed. Yes. David met the Chancellor's gaze without flinching. But if we succeed, the devouring will break against our defenses. And the galaxy will learn that it can be beaten. Not just driven back, destroyed. Admiral Ross stepped forward. We have 18 days before the enemy reaches the outer territories. 18 days to evacuate billions of civilians. 18 days to position our combined fleets. 18 days to prepare for the largest battle in Galactic history. She looked around the command center at the faces of humans and aliens. Let us get to work. Earth hung in the darkness of space, like a blue jewel wrapped in white clouds. David Cole watched it from the observation deck of the council station that had been towed into orbit alongside the largest military fleet ever assembled. 10,000 warships from 300 species surrounded humanity's homeworld. And somewhere beyond the outer planets, the devouring was coming. 80,000 vessels confirmed, Admiral Ross reported from the command center. Her voice was steady, but David could hear the tension beneath the calm. They followed us exactly as predicted. Their fleet is fully committed to the pursuit. As we hoped, David replied. He turned away from the viewport to face the tactical display. Status of our defensive network? All planetary shields are active. The orbital defense grid is online. Ground-based systems are ready. Ross gestured at the display, highlighting positions throughout the solar system. We have positioned the combined fleet in 3 formations. Alpha Fleet guards the inner planets. Beta Fleet is positioned at Jupiter. Gamma Fleet is scattered through the asteroid belt. Chancellor Mortis appeared on the communication screen. His silver face was difficult to read, but his voice carried something that might have been fear. Ambassador Cole, our sensors indicate the enemy will reach your system within 6 hours. Is humanity truly prepared for what is coming? We have been preparing for this moment for 400 years, Chancellor. Even before we knew the devouring existed, we were building defenses against enemies that could corrupt our technology. Every system on Earth operates independently. Every weapon has manual overrides. Every defense is designed to function even if everything else fails. And if everything does fail? David allowed himself a small smile. Then we will improvise. It is what we do best. The next 6 hours passed in tense silence. Throughout the combined fleet, human and alien crews waited at their stations. Prayers were offered in 1,000 languages to gods whose names David could not pronounce. On Earth itself, 8 billion people watched the sky, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether humanity would survive or be erased from existence. Devouring arrived like a wave of darkness. 80,000 vessels poured out of dimensional space, spreading across the solar system in formations that made no logical sense. They had learned from previous encounters. Their patterns were variable now, unpredictable. They moved in ways that defied analysis. They are adapting, Dr. Vance reported from his analysis station, using our own tactics against us, randomizing their movements to prevent prediction. Good, Ross replied. That means they are thinking, and thinking slows them down. The first engagement happened at Jupiter. Beta Fleet, under the command of Captain Torres, faced a force 3 times its size. The battle lasted 4 hours. Human ships wove through the chaos, destroying command nodes as they had at Kairos Prime. Alien vessels, trained in human tactics, played dead until the moment came to strike. The Devouring lost 12,000 ships. Beta Fleet lost 2,000. They are learning faster than anticipated, Torres reported. His transmission was distorted by battle damage. Our tactics are becoming less effective. They are starting to predict our movements. Fall back to the asteroid belt, Ross ordered. Join with Gamma Fleet. Make them chase you. The Devouring pursued, as they always did. Their vast fleet consumed the wreckage of fallen vessels, incorporating technology and resources into their own structure. They grew even as they advanced. But they also spread thin, stretched across millions of kilometers of space. At the asteroid belt, Gamma Fleet was waiting. Out in formation. Not in anything resembling military order. Human and alien ships were scattered among the asteroids, powered down, appearing as nothing more than debris. The Devouring sensors swept past them without recognition. And then, as the main enemy force passed through, every hidden vessel came alive. The battle in the asteroid belt was chaos incarnate. Ships emerged from asteroids. Weapons fired from unexpected angles. Suicide runs destroyed command nodes at the cost of the attacking vessels. The Devouring tried to adapt, but the combined fleet kept changing. Every tactic was used once, and then abandoned. Every pattern was established only to be broken. 12 more hours of running battle. 30,000 Devouring ships destroyed. But the combined fleet was dying too. When the survivors finally retreated to the inner system, only 4,000 allied vessels remained. 4,000 against 38,000. David watched the numbers on the tactical display and felt his heart sink. They had fought brilliantly. They had caused unprecedented losses. But it was not enough. They are approaching Earth, Ross said quietly. Our fleet cannot stop them. Then we will use what we have left. David activated the planetary sea. Communication system. All ground-based defenses prepare for orbital engagement. This is the moment we have been building toward for 4 centuries. Earth came alive, From pole to pole, weapons platforms that had been dormant since the machine wars activated. Orbital defense satellites that predated human space travel powered up. Underground facilities that had been sealed for generations opened their doors. Humanity's homeworld revealed defenses that no one outside Earth had ever known. Existed, the devouring reached Earth orbit and slammed into a wall of fire. Weapons designed to fight. Machine intelligence attacked, devouring vessels at their most vulnerable points. Systems that could not be hacked sent orders through shielded channels. Humans who had trained for this moment since childhood manned weapons that required no computers, no networks, no technology that could be corrupted. The battle for Earth lasted 9 days. 9 days of constant bombardment. 9 days of devouring vessels falling from the sky to crash on continents below. 9 days of human soldiers dying in numbers that would have been unimaginable to any other species. Entire cities were destroyed. Millions of lives were lost. Humanity paid a price that would haunt them for generations. But they held. On the 9th day, something changed. The devouring fleet, reduced to fewer than 8,000 vessels, suddenly stopped its assault. The survivors pulled back, gathering in high orbit above the burning planet. What are they doing? Ross demanded. Her command center had been relocated 3 times as stations were. Destroyed around her, Dr. Vance studied his displays with exhausted eyes. They are attempting to withdraw, but something is wrong. Their coordination is failing completely. Look at their movement patterns. David watched the enemy fleet on the tactical display. Vance was right. The devouring ships were not retreating in any organized fashion. They were drifting, colliding with each other, firing weapons at random targets. What happened to them? I think they are overloaded, Vance said slowly. Throughout this entire battle, we have been feeding them contradictory data. False signals, misleading sensor readings, tactics that make no sense, strategies that change without warning. For 9 days, they have been trying to analyze and adapt to an enemy that cannot be analyzed or adapted to. And now their systems are crashing, Tellus realized. The Meridian Compact ambassador had remained at the command center throughout the battle, refusing to evacuate. They have absorbed too much contradictory information. They cannot process it. More than that, David said quietly. Understanding dawned as he watched the chaos above. They are trying to incorporate human thinking patterns. They absorb everything they encounter, every technology, every strategy, every way of thinking. But human thinking cannot be incorporated. It cannot be systemized. We are too random, too chaotic, too illogical. You are corrupting them, Ross breathed. Not with technology, with ideas. We are breaking their minds with our minds. Above Earth, the devouring fleet tore itself apart. Ships attacked each other without reason. Weapon systems fired at empty space. Vessels crashed together in formations that had no purpose. In less than an hour, 80,000 ships had been reduced to nothing but drifting wreckage. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from across the solar system, from ships that had hidden among moons and asteroids, from vessels that had played dead for days, the survivors of the combined fleet emerged. They gathered above Earth, human and alien vessels, side by side, and stared at the debris field that had been their greatest enemy. Chancellor Mortis's image appeared on every communication channel in the fleet. Impossible, he whispered. The devouring is defeated. Truly defeated. Not driven back. Not forced to retreat. Destroyed. Not destroyed, David corrected. He was looking at the wreckage with an expression that was not quite triumph. Broken. There is a difference. Somewhere, in some other dimension, the core intelligence still exists. It will learn from this. It will adapt. Eventually, it will return. Then we will fight it again, Warlord Grath declared. His voice carried across every speaker in the fleet. And again. And again. Because now we know it can be beaten. Now we know there is hope. Hope, High Arbiter Nessa said softly. Such a human concept. Yes, David agreed. He looked at the battered planet below, at the fires still burning on continents that had been devastated by the battle, at the cost that humanity had paid. But now it belongs to all of us. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council formally rescinded humanity's exclusion. But that was merely symbolic. The real change was deeper. Human advisors were requested by every species in the Council. Human tactics were studied in military academies across the galaxy. Human ways of thinking, once dismissed as primitive, became valued as the unpredictability that had saved civilization. David Cole stood in the restored Grand Hall 1 year later, no longer as an accused criminal, but as the newly appointed High Ambassador of the Joint Defense Initiative. Around him, 300 species applauded as Chancellor Mortis presented the formal alliance treaty. They believed they had won, Mortis said during his speech. The devouring. They believed that humanity's weaknesses made them insignificant. They believed that the galaxy's ancient species were the only ones that mattered. He paused, looking directly at David. They were wrong, and their mistake saved us all. Later, in his private quarters, David looked at the star chart that covered one wall. Somewhere beyond those stars, in dimensions that human science was only beginning to understand, the devouring still existed, wounded, broken, but patient doubt it would return someday. And when it did, the galaxy would need to be ready. But for the first time in thousands of years, there was genuine hope, Dot, because now the galaxy had humanity. And humanity never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting, never stopped surviving, Dot. It was what made them human, and it was what would save the universe.